You already know. You know the monthly payment costs more than the cash price. You know the subscription you've not used in 3 months should be cancelled. You know a takeaway is expensive and the supermarket version isn't that different. You knew that car would depreciate from the moment you drove it. You know all of this, and you're still doing it. You knew before you clicked. You'll know tomorrow when you briefly consider cancelling as the direct debit leaves your account. The financial advice industry has spent decades operating on one assumption, that the problem is information, that if people understood compound interest, understood the true cost of PCP finance, or understood what their monthly subscriptions added up to annually, they'd behave differently. They wouldn't. You are the proof. You already understand all of it. This video isn't financial advice, nor will it tell you what to do with your money, but it's going to explain why you already know what to do with your money and why that knowledge on its own has never been enough. The assumption that knowledge produces behavior change is one of the most tested and most consistently disproved ideas in social science. It's called the knowledge-behavior gap. The measurable, documented, reproducible distance between what people know they should do and what they actually do. It exists in health, in diet, in exercise, in sleep, in financial decision-making. The financial services industry didn't get the memo. The FCA's Financial Capability Strategy, the Money and Pension Service's National Financial Wellbeing Strategy, the personal finance curriculum introduced into British schools in 2014, the entire financial literacy movement that has generated thousands of educational resources, all of it is built on the premise that the problem is a lack of knowledge. Here is what the research actually shows. A 2014 meta-analysis published in Psychological Science examined 201 studies on financial literacy interventions across 168,000 participants. Its conclusion was stark. Financial literacy interventions explained just 0.1% of the variance in financial behavior. Teaching people about compound interest doesn't change how they feel about their credit card statement. Teaching people the true cost of PCP doesn't change how they feel about a brand new car. Knowledge is processed in the prefrontal cortex, the slow thinking part of the brain that handles logic and long-term planning. Financial decisions are made in the limbic system, the fast, emotional, immediate response part of the brain that handles fear, desire, social belonging, and the physical sensation of relief. These two systems don't talk to each other in the way the financial literacy movement assumes. Knowing something in the prefrontal cortex does not automatically translate into a different response in the limbic system. The person who knows exactly how much their credit card debt is costing them in interest still reaches for the card when the anxiety gets high enough, because the card provides limbic relief that the knowledge cannot. This is not weakness, this is neurology. Here's the part that changes the shape of the problem. The financial services industry, the retail industry, the food delivery industry, the gambling industry, the social media platforms, and the consumer credit industry all understood the knowledge-behavior gap decades before the financial literacy movement tried to close it. They built their products around it. Drazen Prelec and Duncan Semester's research on the pain of paying showed that credit cards reduced the psychological discomfort of spending by decoupling the moment of purchase from the moment of payment. The industry read this research and designed frictionless payment systems, contactless cards, and one-click checkout flows that maximize the decoupling effect and minimize the moment of financial reckoning. You know that paying by card feels different from paying with cash. You've known this for years. The knowledge hasn't changed how you pay. Behavioral economists Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein introduced the concept of the nudge in 2008. Their insight was that behavior is shaped more by the architecture of the choice than by the content of the choice. How options are presented, ordered, and framed determines what people choose, independent of what they know about the options. The financial industry has been applying nudge theory to its products since long before Thaler and Sunstein named it. The subscription that requires 3 screens and a phone call to cancel. The insurance that auto-renews unless you remember to cancel before the renewal date. The PCP monthly payment shown prominently and the total cost of the agreement shown in smaller print at the bottom of the document. These aren't oversights, they're architecture, designed by people who understood that your knowledge of the true cost was not going to be enough to override the architecture of the choice in the moment you were making it. And then there is the most powerful mechanism of all, social belonging. Jeffrey Miller's research on consumer behavior found that the most powerful driver of spending is not desire for the object, it's the fear of exclusion from the social group that the object signals membership of. The car is not a car, the bag is not a bag, the restaurant is not a meal. They're answers to a question the limbic system is asking constantly. Am I still in? Am I still enough? That question isn't answered by knowing the object is overpriced. The limbic system doesn't accept knowledge as currency. It accepts belonging. And the consumer economy has spent a century learning exactly which products to attach to exactly which belonging signals. You know the handbag costs more than it is worth as an object. The limbic system does not care about its worth as an object. It cares about what happens to your sense of belonging if you are the person at the table who does not have one. Morgan Housel, in The Psychology of Money, makes an observation that reframes the entire conversation about financial decision-making. No one is crazy. Every financial decision, including the ones that look irrational from the outside, makes sense given the information available and the emotional context of the moment it was made. The person who knows their credit card balance and adds to it anyway is not ignoring the knowledge. They are responding to a pressure that the knowledge was never equipped to address. The knowledge behavior gap has a measurable financial cost. The average UK adult holds £3,800 in unsecured debt outside their mortgage. The average credit card debt interest rate in the UK reached a record high in 2025, exceeding 23% APR. At that rate, a £3,800 balance maintained for 3 years costs approximately £1,400 in interest. Every person carrying that balance knows that paying it off would save them £1,400. The knowledge has not cleared the balance. Now look at the subscriptions. The average British household spends £1,900 a year on subscriptions. Research consistently shows that people underestimate their subscription spend by 50%. The average person guesses around £80, but the actual average is closer to £160. The gap between what people think they're spending and what they actually spend is not a knowledge gap, it's an attention gap. And the subscription industry is built on the assumption that attention is finite and that the product sitting quietly on a direct debit will consistently win against the competing demands on that finite attention. The person who underestimates their subscriptions is not uninformed about how subscriptions work. They're simply operating in an environment that has been deliberately designed to make the total invisible while making each individual element feel negligible. The pension gap is where the knowledge behavior gap produces its most expensive long-term consequence. The Pensions Policy Institute estimates that 17 million people in the UK are undersaving for retirement. The overwhelming majority of them know they're undersaving. They know what a pension is. They know about compound growth. They know that starting earlier produces better outcomes than starting later. They're still not saving enough. Knowledge of compound growth does not make the retirement feel more real. It remains abstract. The car repair remains concrete. The financial cost of the present bias across a working life, the pension undersaving, the credit card interest, the subscriptions not cancelled, the PCP cycles not broken, compounds to a number that would be significantly larger than the cost of any individual bad decision. The knowledge behavior gap is not a single expensive mistake. It is the accumulated cost of a gap that operates continuously across every financial decision a person makes across their entire adult life. The knowledge behavior gap was not discovered by the financial industry, but it was industrialized by it. The discipline of behavioral economics, which formally identified and named many of the cognitive biases that produced the gap, began entering mainstream awareness in the 1970s through the work of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. Their research on how humans actually make decisions, as opposed to how economic theory assumed they made decisions, was eventually awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002. The financial industry had been applying the practical insights of this research for decades before it was formally named. Default enrollment, the option that requires no action to accept and action to reject. Subscription auto-renewal, the pre-ticked box, the opt-out rather than the opt-in, the free trial that converts automatically. These are all applications of the same insight. Inertia is the most powerful force in consumer behavior. Whatever requires no action will be maintained. Whatever requires action will be deferred. The industry built its recurring revenue model on inertia, not on the product being worth the money. on the action required to stop paying being consistently more effort than the passive continuation of paying. The payday loan industry went further. It targeted the specific moment when the knowledge-behavior gap is at its widest, the moment of acute financial stress, when the cognitive bandwidth available for rational decision-making is at its lowest, and the need for immediate relief is at its highest. The payday lender does not need the borrower to be uninformed about the interest rate. It needs them to be in enough distress that the interest rate is less immediate than the relief. The social media platforms completed the architecture with the comparison engine. The feed that shows you what your life is missing is not a social network, it's a demand generation system. It creates demand for things you did not know you wanted by showing you people who have them. The demand is not rational. It doesn't respond to knowledge of the platform's business model. Knowing that Instagram is designed to make you feel inadequate does not stop you feeling inadequate when you are on Instagram. Every one of these systems was built by people who understood the knowledge-behavior gap, who understood that the consumer's knowledge of the product's true cost was not a meaningful obstacle to the purchase, and who designed accordingly. You came into this video knowing things. You leave it knowing that knowing was never the problem. The gap between what you know and what you do is not a character flaw. It's the operating environment, built deliberately, maintained profitably, and running continuously underneath every financial decision you will make for the rest of your life. The system was not designed for the version of you that sits quietly with a spreadsheet and calculates long-term costs. It was designed for the version of you that exists at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night when the week has been hard and the phone is in your hand and the frictionless option is right there. That version of you is not weak. That version of you is human. And the industry has known exactly what to do with human since before you were born.